So the big question is, why is offshore exposure important in an SA context? So, I would imagine that most of the viewers today are from South Africa. You guys have probably got a lot of your wealth concentrated in South Africa, whether that's through your property portfolios or your businesses. And, often people don't diversify their assets enough. As you know, South Africa is an emerging market. So, we do have a lot of political risk, like all other emerging markets, and the rand does tend to weaken over time. So we do believe that it is quite essential that, a portion of your portfolio at least is offshore in US dollars or other currencies. However, at Herenya, we do all our offshore portfolios in US dollar. So some key points to talk about. If you look at the South African market, especially the top 40, you would notice that about 40% of our index is in resources, and then about 10.5% in NASPAs or process, which is exposed to China. So the problem with this is that, when you're investing in the South African market or in a top 40, a passive fund, or even most managers which kind of benchmark towards the top 40, you do have a very high concentration in resources. And as you would have noticed with, the recent moves in resources, if you look at the gold shares, I was just looking before this presentation, and I mean, some of those gold shares have fallen about 40% from those highs. So if you were just invested in an SA portfolio and you obviously invested at the incorrect time, you could have easily been down about 40% at this point in time, just on the resources, which have obviously impacted the index. So we think that, the SA market is very concentrated, and to try and diversify from that, we do think an offshore portfolio is quite critical in an SA context. Other reasons why we prefer offshore, the South African market is unfortunately quite limited in terms of what kind of sectors you can get exposed to. I mean, we're very highly concentrated, as I said, in resources, industrials, financials. But if you're looking to get to, the growth sectors, which is, artificial intelligence, biotech, and software, unfortunately, there isn't much place to invest in our market. So if you do want to get, exposure to those exciting sectors, unfortunately, the only way to do that is to have an offshore portfolio. Obviously, the other important point to note is the rand's long-term depreciation. So, I mean, the statistics over the last 20 years shows that the rand does depreciate by about 5% per annum, which means that if you invested in an offshore portfolio, you do get the benefits of the rand weakening by being in dollars. So the important point there is diversification plus USD exposure is important, and it does help you to protect and grow your global purchasing power.